Just a couple of minutes to go. Well, hello everybody. I'm Martin Ralph. I'm chair of the Food and Drink Engineering Committee of the IMechE. A bit of a gruff voice this morning. I'm standing in for Alan Barton, who's on family business. So we're here to talk about PFAS. That's per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. In other words, forever chemicals. Basically, we're looking at the way the European Union has handled the laws into banning these substances, and you know, the UK is likely to do the same thing over the coming period. So I think the best thing to do is to get straight on and introduce our first speakers. That's Ralph Vogel. He's technical director of the European Sealing Association, and his presentation has been partly put together by his colleague, the secretary of the organisation, called Mark Neal, and we're hoping Mark Neal will join us shortly. So I'll hand you over straight away to Ralph Vogel.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. I try to share my screen now. Okay. I hope you can see my presentation now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not in presentation mode.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can start with the presentation. I think Mark is still not on the line, but I will go ahead. So it's about the proposed PFAS legislation and the effect on the process industry, especially from the view of the European Sealing Association from the sealing side. And again, this presentation was to put together by myself, Mark, as well as our other colleague, Özlem Devlin, who also provided some of the slides. So to start with, who are the ESA? The ESA is the European Sealing Association, and we're representing companies in the EU and the UK manufacturing sealing devices. So mainly we have 5 product divisions, which are packings, flange gaskets, mechanical seals, elastomeric and polymeric seals, as well as expansion joints. And it's a non-profit organization, and it's basically the voice of the sealing industry in Europe. We have around 59 members now. I think there might be 1 or 2 coming in soon, and we have links to 2 research organizations which are doing testing with us, which is IMechE in Germany and CETIM in France. So what are the aims of the ESA? So the main thing is to work together. Despite our companies might be competitors in the market, but there are common interests, like, for example, the PFAS issue, upcoming legislation, working on standards like CEN, ISO standards, API standards, develop further the sealing technology, and also look into the safety, efficiency, and environmental protection. So, and again, that's what we do. And that's why we're here today also to talk about PFAS, because it will affect our industry quite significantly. So I will start off basically about PFAS development. When did it start? It started a long time ago in the 1930s when Teflon was discovered. Then we go through the line there. So was used, for example, in the Manhattan Project for the atomic bomb. Then you probably see in the 50s what we all basically know from our household here, so like coatings for frying pans or for textiles. in the 60s, then basically development came into there. So especially was also in discussion nowadays, firefighting foams. And then in the 70s, actually, the PFAS development expanded quite significantly, so into different industries. And now basically in the 2000s, we know we have a certain global distribution of PFAS. And again, certain PFAS were already then in the early 2000s regulated. And some manufacturers also voluntarily also started to phase out certain products. And currently now we have the issue that the EU basically is bringing in a proposed ban on the blanket PFAS. But again, we will go through during my presentation what differences are in the PFASs and what will be happening. So I don't go into specifics of the chemistry. I think Christian, the presenter after me, he has some more slides about this. So, but the main thing is what we want to talk about here. What's also interesting for the process industry as well as the sealing industry is basically the fluoropolymers, and they're basically long-term carbon chemicals basically, and very, very persistent. That's the advantage of it. Like PTFE is chemically very resistant, so even against most severe acids. So, but that's also the problem that the legislator has then, that it's a so-called forever chemical. So again, where PFAS chemicals already mentioned, non-stick coating for the frying pans, but it's everywhere. So it's industrial processes, it's in the firefighting foams, textile, like company Gore, GFO, you know, food contact materials and packaging, which will be also the topic of the talk by Christian afterwards, metal plating, consumer mixers, ski wax, transport, but also basically then medical devices. PTFE, for example, is implanted into bodies now. It's approved by the FDA. So cosmetics, lubricants, semiconductors. So it's a wide range basically where PFAS chemicals are used. The problem starts basically when we look at this chart. Basically, you see the red dots. That's where PFAS was detected. And you see in the UK as well as in Europe, it's especially there where the heavy industrialized regions are. So, and that's where the EU is coming from to put up a certain ban or regulation, let's say. Again, why are they doing this? Because there are certain health effects that have been detected, especially now. There are some research studies of people developing cancer, mainly basically who was living near plants who produce, for example, PFAS chemicals, where the chemicals get into the water and the drinking water, so on, and it's passed on into the human body. So, and there are certain areas basically, again, where it already has been proven that PFAS chemicals, especially PFOA or PFOS, which are already regulated, are harmful. So, and that will affect basically the human health, and that's what we don't want. So what's basically already there in the EU? So like I mentioned, the PFOS was regulated already under the POP, the Persistent Organic Pollutants Regulation 2009. PFO has been banned under the POPs regulation since 2020. Also PFHXS and its salts, that has been added in May 2023. And all these chemicals are already on the REACH candidate list. So, and there are certain limits basically when it's certain substances, mixtures and articles are tested. For PFA, for example, it's 0.025 milligrams per kilograms. And But again, some of these chemicals like PFOA and PFOS, due to the already existing legislation, have been reduced or phased out by the PTFE and fluoropolymer producers in the EU, as well as worldwide voluntarily from 2010. So what we're talking today about is there's a new EU restriction proposal that has been put in by the national authorities from Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden. And again, they putting up sort of a blanket, sort of a ban for more than 10,000 PFAS chemicals, which is very, very wide. So, and again, what the ESA and other companies and trade organizations are saying is there's no differentiation in this group, because again, not all PFASs are the same. So, and if you look at the fluoropolymer group, which are used in seals, and it's mostly basically PTFE, but it's also other materials like also fluoroelastomers like FKM, FKKM. So the OECD class the fluoropolymers as chemicals of low concern. And thus, like I mentioned, PTFE is also approved, for example, by the EPA as implants for the human body. So again, last year, the first restriction and supporting documents were published by ECHA on their website on the 7th of 2023. And I've also basically a few slides affecting the UK in particular. So what is the UK doing? Because, you know, since Brexit, it's no longer in the European Union, but again, legislation is still following very closely there. So again, the UK basically is following the Stockholm Convention, which also has some restrictions due to PFOA and PFOS, the UK REACH, the F-gas regulation, and then also some specific regulations for food contact. What's very good in the UK is that there's a chemical stakeholder forum, where basically stakeholders from the industry, from government and the regulators are together, and also of the waste management industry, and to discuss basically affected chemicals and how also to dispose them. And in October 2022, a PFAS working group was established, and to support basically also the UK PFAS policy then. So again, there has been quite a lot of input there. So, and some policy options have been created, and the output is not ready yet, but will be probably coming out soon. So again, what else is regulated? So the HSE, so the UK Health and Safety Executive, issued basically a call for evidence on PFAS in December 2021 to basically prepare a regulatory management analysis. Also, the ESA participated in this call for evidence. So, and it was published last year, then on the 4th of April. And again, it basically also goes into detail there. So, especially also for processing aids, which are used in the manufacture and processing of fluorinated polymers. So, and 36 individual PFASs have been registered, and probably another 40 will become registered in the future. So, but the main thing is, again, like in the EU, the two substances in there is PFOA and its salts, and perfluorinated silane, and like PFOS. So what will be the next steps in the UK? So at the moment, there's preparation firefighting forms restriction dossier, and the call for evidence is open at the moment. And then there will be further work on the risk management analysis. So especially the assessment of certain PFASs, like I mentioned already, the processing aids there, and safety and health and safety information. And again, there's plans to basically engage stakeholders more closely to basically bring up then UK REACH legislation, a restriction covering then industrial and consumer uses. Also basically in 2022, the drinking water guidelines have been updated. So the Drinking Water Inspectorate in the UK published an updated information letter and guidance for PFAS in drinking water for England and Wales, especially also how to monitor and what should be the guidelines. So, and the guideline is there that there will be a limit of 0.1 micrograms per liter, which is basically 0.1 parts per billion. So the Americans like to do this ppb. So, and again, there are certain thresholds. There's tier 1, 2, and 3. So there are even lower ones, 0.01. And this control measures must be implemented by the different drinking water authorities if it's found that the PFAS levels are too high. And like I mentioned, the US is basically only followed very recently, last month. So they announced basically a primary drinking water regulation for 6 PFASs on the 10th of April this year. So again, it's similar like in the UK. So the public water systems have to monitor for this PFASs. And there's a 3-year period basically to do this. And then basically they have to show that they're in compliance. So with certain levels in there, so on, that they basically go under this level. So, and you see some of the levels here in the graph down below. And again, it's the same chemicals we're talking about, which has been already regulated, like PFOA, PFOS, and PFHXS, and PFNA. So that's basically very recently done in the US. Otherwise, it's very fragmented in the US. If you look at into the PFAS legislation, that's down to the different sections of the countries there, like Maine, Massachusetts. They're very basically on the forefront, bringing in legislation concerning PFAS. Again, going back to the EU. So what was the timeline I mentioned already? So the first pre-publication of the PFAS restriction proposal was on the 7th of last year. Then on the 22nd of March, the 6 months open public consultation process started, where everybody could have its say and put in information there. That ended in September. And then the plan was really that the committees in ECHA have a look at the input there from the consultation and would publish in March 2000 of this year their first draft opinion, and then basically in June it would be published for the European Commission, and then in 2025 there should be amendment for the restriction proposal. But again, this probably won't happen. I've just a slide in here too. So what we as the ESA did in regard of the PFAS. So we already started in 2020 and put our first position paper in there, updated it with more up-to-date information in 2022, published articles like in Wild World magazine to also inform some of our end users and customers, also in the UK in the BPMA journal. We are collaborating also with other trade organizations like CEFIC for the big chemical trade organization here in Europe, Plastic Europe, which is representing the plastic producers, BPMA, the British Pump Manufacturing Association, and the VDMA, which is the German Machine Producers Association. We also collaboration closely with our sister organization in the US, which is the Fluid Sealing Association. They are also working now and putting input there, and we help them out too with some information here from Europe to put in also for the US legislation. And again, we submitted information to the public consultation. Like I said, we participate in the UK one and in the EU one. And we also have been granted observer status now to some of the EHEDG meetings, so we can listen into and see what's happening. And what we also did in the last year, we commissioned a socio-economic analysis for PFAS, especially for the sealing industry, with a research company called Ricardo, which was very extensive and also very expensive. So it was a six-figure sum we had to pay there. But again, we felt it's very important to get the right information into the EU. So what was coming out of this socio-economic analysis? So again, they sent out in March last year a questionnaire to around 440 participants, which is not only ESA companies, member companies, but also basically companies from the whole value chain. So starting with fluoropolymer manufacturers, seal manufacturers, and also basically distributors as well as end users like chemical industry. So not all companies returned, but there was a very good basically feedback. And Ricardo prepared a first draft in July 2023, and we have a ESA PFAS task force, so which reviewed it. We had some discussion there because we wanted to go for an outright exemption for PTFE, but Ricardo made the case that the EU doesn't allow this, so there's only room for derogation. So, but we put our views in certain comments in there. So, and the final document was then published at the end of August and distributed to all participants in the questionnaire, as well as put forward to EHEDG then. So what were the findings in there? So especially for the sealing industry in Europe, so it says that there would be a probably annualized loss of between 1.6 to 3.7 billion euros per year between 2024 and 2042. And if we basically look into the downstream users, that can be increased to probably 6.1 to 19.5 billion, which is quite a lot of money. And not only there will be loss in revenue and turnover, but also probably loss in workplaces. So, and again, we had to look also if people had some substitute or reformulated solutions to replace PFASs. So, and it was said around 20% of products could be replaced, but again, it's always the question, can it be for the full spectrum or is it only for certain niche applications? So, okay, the conclusion then of the Ricardo report was that basically a time-limited derogation for fluoropolymer-based sealing devices was suggested. And at the moment, basically, it's maximum it's 12 years. So, and then there will be probably a review if there's some other alternatives have been found, or if not, basically that has to be extended. But it will be a significant impact, basically, if there's an outright ban, especially also because a lot of the sealing materials are also used to keep the EU competitive and also to meet then the objectives like in the EU Green Deal, reducing emission for the future. So coming back to the REACH consultant process, so what happened basically that they were overwhelmed really because ECHA received 5,600 individual submissions overall. And if you look here, it's split down by country, so it's not only from Europe. Somehow, actually, Sweden put in the most because I think Sweden, a lot of individuals from Sweden replied there, so that's why there's quite a lot of numbers there. Then it's Germany, but then already Japan, because again, Europe is a big export market for Japan, and they see Belgium, China, then Italy, but also the US, and then some other European countries. So, and again, that's the breakdown. And where was it coming from? Like I said, there was probably 1/3 from individuals, probably around 60%. No, sorry. Yeah, might be a little bit more, so this might be 1/3 here. So from companies, and then probably around 10-15% from industry or trade organizations like the ESA, and the other ones are basically broken down like universities, national authorities, and other organizations. Okay, what's happening now? Again, there are two committees in ECHA. So one is the RAC committee, so for the risk assessment, and the SEA committee for the socio-economic analysis. And they basically goes through all the submissions to the consultations and have to form their opinion and basically draft then a report. And again, here you see basically the timeline as it was, like I presented in the previous slides. So, but what happens now, and the vibe that we got back was that it takes much longer to go through all this input into the consultation. So it will be probably until the end of this year and early 2025 until the two committees come up with their new proposals. If this will happen, then there might be a new consultation process of 2 months, where all the basically people who already submitted their input for the first consultation process are allowed to put in further evidence, and that should be evaluated then probably in the first or second quarter of 2026. And then basically everything what's coming after this blue line here, so is a little bit of speculation. So it might be then basically, if it's done like this, so that there will be interim proposal released at the end of 2026 that has to go into the different committees in ECHA, and then there will be a final proposal probably at the end of 2028 to the EU. And then it goes through the EU process. The EU has to vote in it, and it probably brings it up to 2030 before then this PFAS regulation will come into law. And then after this, again, like I already mentioned, this different derogations, if they're granted, will be coming in process, bringing us up then to 2042. So again, a little bit of input to give you a perspective where all the fluoropolymers used here in the EU. So quite a bit, nearly a third is going into the automotive industry, like gaskets, seals, other things. So into batteries now too. So into semiconductors, aerospace, chemical industry, and medical and pharma industry, and the rest, 21%, is others like food, beverages, and other processing industries. So the products basically are also shown here. So where we are coming from is seals, O-rings, gaskets, make up only around 11%. Their batteries, for example, 2%. Pumps, wires, cables, 5%. Hoses, tubes, quite 15%, big ones. Liners, films and tapes, coatings, lubricants. So quite a lot of things. And textile and fabrics also makes up a part, like I mentioned already, GFO, this treatment of fabrics, waterproof. Again, what's the life cycle then of the fluoropolymers? Again, you see here what's happening is we have the production, we have then the specific product manufacturing, the product use, and what's very important also in the whole process, what ECHA also wants to know is the end of life, basically how are these products then disposed of, because it's an issue, because they are called forever chemicals. So if you throw them away, they will be still there in 100 years. So how are you treating them? So what is the industry doing then at the moment, beside basically fighting for derogation? So also looking into alternatives, like I already mentioned, the fluorosurfactants used in the manufacture of fluoropolymers, are still PFAS substances currently. So, and they're under the spotlight. So, and a lot of fluoropolymer manufacturers now started to look into alternatives, into different other processing aids. So, non-fluorous surfactant technology. So, and at the moment, that's in development, and hopefully it will basically give us the same values we have already at the moment for the fluoropolymers that we are using. And the other one, like I mentioned, is the end of life management. And I took this slide from a presentation we had last week in our AGM of the ESA. We had a speaker from Plastic Europe, Nicolas Robin. He's their director there. So, and Plastics Europe at the moment has a project looking into the end of life measurement, what's happening with fluoropolymers. So when basically are they thrown away? Can they be reused? Is there recycling initiatives? So there are certain initiatives already which are investigated, what can be done. The other thing is looking how can you destroy PFASs. You can do this by incineration, but also under controlled environment. And then the last resort is basically putting it into landfill. But again, we know basically fluoropolymers, they won't admit anything. Nothing harmful will come out there, even if you put it into landfill. Okay, to conclude then, like I already mentioned, fluoropolymers are recognized by OECD as chemicals of low concern. They're used in quite a lot of key sectors in the EU. Especially for the Green Deal initiatives and aiding also into the economic digital transition. And at the moment, there's no other chemistry available to have the same performance. So there might be certain alternatives, but they don't have the broad range basically of chemical, thermal, plasma, and radioactive resistance for seals like fluoropolymers have. And any chemical that could withstand similar situations would be also quite persistent. So even if there's an alternative, and that might be again an issue for the legislators. And again, the restriction on these devices have immediate repercussions on Europe or on Europe's gross value product, and basically hinder progress towards future economic objectives. So, and basically again, what's happening too, like I mentioned before, so they're used for textile things and other things. So again, fluoropolymers are highly protective for workers, consumers, and the environment, and to minimize the release of other harmful chemicals. Again, that brings me now to the end of my presentation. So, and I think like to thank you for your attention, and I think we will handle the question then after Christian's presentation.
Well,
Okay.
thank you very much there, Ralph. While Christian is loading up his presentation, just like to say, you know, I'm of a generation that's gone through this before with asbestos and CFC refrigeration. And you know, it's something we have to live through. And if there is going to be a ban on some of these chemicals, then we leave it to the scientists and the engineers to overcome it. And that's, I think, where we're heading. So it's good to hear your view and how the EU and eventually the UK will handle this. So anyway, there's a few questions coming in on the chat box, which we'll cover later. So it's now down to me to introduce Christian Gubart. He works for a company called Angst and Pfister. I think it's a Swiss company, but he works in Germany, and he also represents the European Hygienic Engineering and Design Group, EHEDG. EHEDG have actually issued a policy paper, or which is available online if you want to see it. Anyway, let's go for Christian. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, welcome to my presentation. I'm very Arnold, to give you a little bit an insight into what an easy field of business might be affected, which we maybe not consider directly. But oh, no, should also work. There's a small delay. Okay, can you see my second slide? Just give me a hands up.
Yes, we can.
Second slide. Yeah. Okay, great. So just a little bit more of chemistry, like Ralph already promised. We're speaking about perfluoroalkyl substances, and the definition is one of the major parts which is criticized by the chemists. The definition for the European proposal is that everything which has carbon to fluorine bond or two fluorines is considered to be a PFAS. So this affects PTFE, this is FCAM, this is FFCAM. There's a lot of different substances, short and long chain substances, which are considered PFAS. So at the end, it's 10,000 substances, and more than 10,000. There are a couple of them we can imagine, which is really a universe. So it's really something the proposal is really covering a lot of different chemicals, and for sure there are dangerous ones and there are less dangerous ones, and the main issue is really we're talking about one side of the coin, and there is another side of the coin. So we're talking about chemical resistance, because carbon and fluorine have a very strong bond. And if we talk about chemical resistance, we're talking about that what we really like, long-lasting seals in that term, or long-lasting materials. If we now want to discard these materials, the carbon-fluorine bond is also hard to destroy. If we throw it into a landfill, there's no bacteria being able to attacking these carbon-fluorine bonds. If it's a carbon-hydrogen bond, there are bacteria which are able to attack that. So we are really talking about the same chemical effect, but just with a different angle. And in the past, when we applied these materials in different applications, we really liked the chemical resistance or the thermal resistance, which is just another term for physics. So basically, we applied them everywhere where we needed strong materials, long-lasting materials, and really wanted them. And now we really see the backside of that long-lasting chemistry, and we see and find some of the shorter chain in groundwater, soil, and water, and also human body, like Ralph already said. But there is only a part of them being found, and not all of these 10,000. This is very important to know. And if we're talking about of these hazardous chemicals, it's really a question if we want just to ban everything, which is harmful, because then we're ending up with nothing at the end, which is long lasting. And I want to point out again, we everywhere in the technical applications where we wanted to have these long-lasting materials, we applied them. Not all necessary only for sealing, for food and beverage, also for chemical industry, automotive, food processing. This is just the part I will cover, but basically everywhere. There's a nice paper which is even from the Royal Society of Chemistry where there is an overview, and where I have a couple of things I want to show to you. So aerospace, okay, probably they started flying with wood and some textiles and some paint, and that was it. But this is 120 years ago, and you will imagine that we might be having a little advantage to using it not like that we did it before. Biotechnology, chemistry, everything which we have in semiconductor is not possible without the fluorine chemistry. So if we now speak about energy transition from one to another, nuclear plants maybe also, not possible. And a lot of these things, even the pharmaceuticals itself, they contain fluorine. And we really are needing these type of chemistry to get that what we want as an effect. We do not want the chemicals to be in our soil, in our groundwater, in our bodies, for sure. But before we were doing quite well in applying these long-lasting properties and really wanted them. So yeah, even in the watch you might be having, or in the wood industry where you would not expect it. And as a function on the right side now here is really not only the famous firefighting foams, which we applied because there was a need, an urgent need, to be honest. As you know, in Germany we have a volunteer firefighting system. So there are 1.1 million of firefighters, voluntary firefighters in Germany. So I applied once a firefighting foam in my volunteer career, once, but there was really a need. This was a county-specific meeting. So, but back to that later. Cook and baking ware, maybe there were all other possibilities to do that differently, and there's also maybe not the sport industry using these short chain molecules. They also will change, but a couple of them, and these applications we're talking here right now, if Ralph is speaking about sealing industry, there we really need these. So just back to that, what is really polluting the most? It's probably the pollution where you have some of the smaller molecules which are water soluble, easy to transport, and easy to migrate somewhere where we do not want them. And sure, there was a reason why we use that in the chemical and petrochemical industry. There was a reason why we used these firefighting foams in some areas where there was an urgent need. Airfields, a huge of fuel on a place you don't want and it's burning. And it can look like you see this on the right side. If you have so much dark smoke that you cannot see the sun shining through, there is an urgent need for foam, believe me. So there is so many of fuel burning that you really don't get it out, and that's so unfortunately also in a place where you normally do not predict it, where you do not want it to be done because it's a fire. It just starts on a stupidest place you have at that point in time. So it's something which is easily to be released into the environment. And sure, now we find out, okay, the great core, the great thing against the fire is now exactly there where the fire was 30 or 50 years ago. There is a huge contamination. And unfortunately, all these small molecules are also transported. So it's just, we applied this 30 years ago when there was a huge fire, and now we find out, okay, we got the fire out, but yeah, there is some nasty bill to be paid right now. But I really want to strongly underline what Ralph said also regarding polymers and non-polymers. We really have to distinguish between the polymeric, safer use, and the non-polymer, short chain use. And if you now see the different tons where they are used, there is a huge. Can you see my mouse? Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you can. Great. So sure, we as a sealing industry apply a lot of polymers. Yeah. So this is really a huge tonnage, and the short chains, the non-polymers, are used in the electronic industry. Now, the easy question is: do we want to have our iPhones? Do we want our screens? Do we, our flat screens? Do we want still use this type of equipment? Then we need to rely on the electronic industry, and we cannot just find an alternative for that. That's the nasty thing about these modern industries. We really rely on long-lasting seals, but also other long-lasting materials in that whole value chain. And you see now, okay, the famous firefighting foams is just a very limited amount of things. So please, if you now follow up all these communication, all these different news we find in the news, we find it's really very necessary to look carefully on the different figures, on different messages, on the different message senders and their intention to what we send out. Sure, I'm very honest with you. I want, because I don't have an alternative, I still want to continue with FKM in this or that sealing application. The reason is because I believe it's the best solution at that specific point. If you come up with your kind of properties you would be liking. If I don't get them anymore, I have to sell you 4 times the same seal, just because it will maybe only hold a quarter of the lifetime. And that's the back coin if we really cannot use these type of materials anymore. But I want to come to that later, showing you a little bit more into just the food industry. I want to again concentrate on the fluorine, short chain molecules, which are the nasty chemicals, the PCAs, the perfluoroalkyls, where we really have a short chain, maybe let's say 8 to 10 to 12 carbon fluorines, carbon units with fluorine bond on it, and some functional at the end, or the 30,000 repetition of a carbon fluorine building block, where we find them here in the PTFE, in the PVDF, or the FEP being an excellent material around an elastic O-ring, and the PFA. And these materials are really needed in that specific place to guarantee the lifetime of the seal. And whether it's temperature, chemical, or sometimes even the mechanical properties which we are looking at, this is really something which is at stake. Because a little look into what's the legal side here, we have different views on the PFAS issue. US is doing a little bit different, with a different approach, with a different definition. They now come up with registering requirements, and some of these shorter chain molecules are already banned or being monitored very carefully. That's also the same in the European Union. Some of these are already for years under being watched, and the proposal now is just a very big one. China, Japan are beginning to carefully monitor that. Basically, the whole world is looking carefully on PFAS now, and also looking on the European proposal, how that will be developing and how much chaos we will have in the European Union. If we now speak about the European Union, there is a full ban possible. There is a time derogation ban possible, but the philosophy behind is, okay, I've banned the application fully, but how do I come to that? So is it if I have an application for the medical industry being possible, how do I come to that specific device? If it's just an application, it's a valve, and the valve itself is not allowed to be produced anymore, but even if the application within the medical industry might be possible. So at the end, there are a lot of more questions than answers in these parts. So it's nice that we discussed maybe about a mining industry time-dependent derogation of 13.5 years, because we expect there to be something fined until within the next 12 years. But to be honest, are we sure we find something on a second page of the chemistry? Because carbon fluorine is the strongest bond, one of the strongest bonds we can imagine, and there are no alternatives on the forefront, even in the last years. Ralph also mentioned from the 1930s, 1940s to now. And as Ralph said, if we find a good replacement which has the same chemical resistance, it's also something which we have to call persistent. Persistent is just being very strong, chemically wise, not being attacked easily by the surrounding conditions like heat, temperature, chemicals, or bacteria. So, and if the bacteria don't break it up, then it's persistent. So we already spoke about this very interesting timeline, which is not actual anymore, but I just want to show you there is, even if we find something, the risk and the socio and economic panels need to find something which we really can consider as an alternative from my point of view. Otherwise, we are really in a mess. Why? Let's jump a little bit, change the topic to the process industry as a whole, chemical pharmaceutical, but also food industry. We change something by temperature, by chemicals to something other, something which we cannot eat or digest a little bit worse to something we can eat. Yeah, that's very easy cooking. Yeah. There are 3 topics you always have to consider if we talk about seals in the process industry, also with a focus on the food. It's the chemical resistance, the material resistance itself. This might be especially also in the food industry, the mechanical resistance, if you speak about chocolate, soy, nuts, strawberry, the small little green strawberry granules. These green nasty things, they grind away seals. So if we have this as one of the prerequisites for designing a seal in the food and beverage industry, we also have another one to consider, and that's material regulatory demands. So they have to be non-toxic. They have to be under different views and aspects of the chemical industry suited for food contact, not transferring any nasty chemicals into the food. And on the last side, and this is where European Hygienic Engineering Design Group comes in, there needs to be a seal hermetically easy to clean, not to be flipped and installed wrongly. So this is some kind of foolproof design, which is also called hygienic design. It's easy to clean. If you have a spoon and you put it on the water, you have an easy to clean surface. If you have some kitchen apparatus which is not easy to clean, it's not fulfilling the hygienic design. And as we speak in the food industry to have automated cleaning up processes, we really want to design seals. But this is really back to that what the customer wants from us, maybe as Twist or others. But really, I want to speak about these 2 things here: just material resistance, chemical resistance, and temperature resistance. And if we now consider the different materials in food industry, we have 4 normally. We have EPDM, FCAM, HBr, silicon, maybe NBr. NBr is a little bit outdated in some applications still, but yeah, these 5. And if we now come up with these cleaning cycles we find in the industry, doesn't matter if it's a brewery or it does not matter if it's a dairy, cheese or milk plant, whatever, then we always have automated cleaning cycles. We put in sodium or potassium hydroxide solution, hot to 80 degrees Celsius, maybe 95 if you want. Run this through the lines for a couple of minutes, can be 30 minutes, can be 45 minutes, and then we release all the fatty residues. Might be ice cream if you want. After that, we apply nitric acid, normally diluted nitric acid, to get rid of the stains, the calcium salts we have in the line. So wherever in the UK you'll find a brewery, there will be different frequencies of applying these nitric acid because this belongs strongly to their water. If they have a very soft water, they do not need to clean so often with the nitric acid. But if they have a more calcium salts containing water, then they will apply the nitric acid more often. But for the seals in this brewery or this dairy plant, this will need a lot of chemical resistance. And a lot of these materials are not withstanding long-term these diluted acids and the diluted limes. So we tested some of these cleaners very easily. Standard conditions can be here only 65 degrees Celsius, but we put it a little bit more harsh. We put on 50% of the concentrates. Normal, you have 2 to 5% in the application, but we really want to stress our seals a little bit. We looked on the mechanical performance, and we came up with a couple of seals, so a couple of results. And if you already look on EPDM, which has quite a good resistance against these strongly polar media, EPDM is a non-polar one. The non-polar material is much stronger against these polar media, these acids and diluted sodium hydroxide solutions. there is already differences between the EPDMs, but there is one material which is really outstanding in that topic, and that is a fluorinated FCAM in that case. I just want to show you, and maybe you can see that on your screen already. There's an EPDM which has little marks here. So this is really getting brittle, being deformed, little cracks in it. So this will not last long. Even our EPDM sold to that industry for quite some time has some little deformation. So it's really on the edge of the lifetime. Okay, it's 50% concentration. So this is really to stress our seal, but our fluorinated PERTEC FKM still is looking quite good. And yeah, this perfect performance just on the chemical side is something which we really want to see, really need, also just for a brewery or a dairy plant, because we really want to run this plant for the whole year and maybe change at the end of the year, or not directly at Christmas season, but some time of the year. We really want to replace the seals, make everything clean and nice and shiny, and produce again, because producing time that's what we want. And if we now look on this proposal of the European Union, we're really taking out a part of the elastomeric landscape of the FCAMs and the fluorinated silicons. And this is a chemical resistant part, yeah, a little bit like Treasure Island, yeah, the part where the very important, yeah, the cross marks the spot, right? So the very important part which we need for the process industry, not only for the food and beverage, but also for the chemical plants, for the pharmaceutical plants, where we have to have much more replacement than a quarter of the lifetime is not a tough thing. So we really have to look very carefully on that. And now there's another point on it. If we now on the look on the food and beverage industry, we're much more getting into something which we call flavored food. Yeah? Not only beer with something, yeah, energy drinks, orange juice with added preservatives, added flavor, more fruity flavor, more seed oils inside just because we are drinking our orange juice a little bit different like it was in the 80s. Yeah? The peel content, the content for these oils is much higher than it was before. Maybe also the orange itself changed to other, let's say, other families. But at the end, it's something that we produce an orange juice, and we produce a couple of things. And yeah, we produce these flavored drinks followed up with other flavored drinks batches. And we really need to clean up in between and avoid this cross-contamination from one to another. This is just a beverage. We would say, come on, it's orange. After that, it's cherry. There is an orange cherry mix in between. Who cares? Yeah, maybe that's something what we can consider. But this is also a model for pharmaceutical solutions, because from the chemical standpoint, it's a couple of very special molecules. It's to another other type of chemicals. And if we now take the pharmaceutical mixtures, they are not so different to these flavor mixtures, but we really looked into that a little bit more carefully from the food and beverage side. But it's really a model for what we will see in the pharmaceutical industry, that from one material to another, there are different changeover flavor transition from one to another batch. And FCAMs, the fluorinated compounds, really, yeah, have the lowest, but not zero, but the lowest flavor carryover tendency. But it is existing. The material acts like a sponge. You charge it with your flavor or other chemicals, and it gives it up to the following batches. EPDM is the poorest because it's really acting like a sponge, and the FCAM has the best performance in that terms. So it's really a question: do we want that? Can we apply that in the industry? How much do we need to clean in between, and how much downtime will we need to accept? So yes, as Angst & Pfister, as any other sealing industry, I just want to outline a little bit about the strategy. As I've said, we we're taking that very serious. We go to associations to work together with European sealing associations and a lot of different associations. Although European Hygienic Engineering Design Group has posted something about that, so you can see that and get these paperwork done. This paperwork for your own checking. But we really want to advocate for safe and fair treatment of our tiny polymers here, because these are safe to use from our point of view, and also to be disposed safely. On the other side, we are developing new materials in the hope that some of them will be accepted by the European Union legislation, which nobody really can know. I mean, Ralph already mentioned 2030 as a possible outlook. So we do not know exactly what will happen, but we develop some materials, and we also expand our portfolio of the so-called existing non-fluorinated materials. And some of them I want to show you. So we really speak about EPDM, 2 different EPDMs which are fulfilling all the legislation. This is the most important thing, because there might be an alternative material available, but does it also is as safe as the existing ones, which we were checked and carefully looked after, all the possible, including animal testing, all the possible legislations. So EPDM might be an option for especially drinks industry. There's another one, there's silicone, which might be having a much more impact now, which is also very clean compound used in the medical industry widely. So some of these compounds will might be a replacement for the application of FCAM, but not a full alternative, but a bad replacement. So just to show you that coffee machines, we were able, as an example, to apply the silicon seal in a brewing unit. It's one of the possible applications, but it really needs very careful discussions between customer and supplier about the conditions the seal will be in contact with, how easy it needs to be replaced in case of then a limited lifetime. So really, I believe that we, as between supplier and customers, have to be much more closer together now than it was before. So a little outlook, we're speaking about 5,600 comments on the PFAS restriction proposal, which means that when you normally expect 80, or expect maybe 120, you have a workforce in place for dealing with 80 to 120. But if you receive 5,600, you can imagine that the Asia is quite busy at the moment, and nobody knows how that will develop. So just consider that some of these 5,600 comments are not only a 1-pager or 2 pages. Some of them are really hundreds of pages, with scientific scientific notes to literature, additional supporting literature, which also needs to be read and understood, and then put together as a valued opinion of a proposal of the legislation. So it will take some time for sure, quite some time, I would say. I'm sorry I don't have this in German. This is a statement from the German Machine Manufacturers Association, the valve division. So it's a little bit seen apart from the Ricardo study Ralph mentioned as the sealing industry. This is just the valve industry of Germany. Looking on the European exporting business, so the German perspective, it's 3.5 billion yearly between 2024 and 2042, which we expect as a loss, and 33,000 jobs to be cut in the same year, yearly. So I guess we really have to make sure that this is considered fair, and also taking into account the application which we need, and we still want to produce. Close by lies Ludwigshafen here. I'm close to BASF, so probably I have the biggest brewery then here in my neighborhood. If that comes like it is proposed now, I would say there will be tough times, but I hope we will manage to come around that. So thanks a lot for your time, and I'm looking forward to questions in the panel then. So thanks a lot.
Well, thanks very much, Christian. Very interesting talk. So can I ask all the panel members to get in view and unmute? Are we all there? Looks like. Okay. So basically, there's a number of questions on the chat. So I'm using the ones with the most thumbs up signs on them. So see if there's any more recent ones. You carry on putting your questions on the chat if you wish. If we don't get to answer them all in our hour and a half slot, then we will come back to you later with an answer. Okay, so the first question I see is refers to Ralph's PFAS detection map. The question is, what and how were the samples taken and analysed? Was it detection in the human, detection in watercourse, or drinking water supplies?
As far as I know, yeah, Martin, it was drinking water supplies.
Drinking water supply. Okay.
Yeah, Ralph, can I add a comment on that?
Yeah.
And for the people on the call, I'm Mike Easton, so I'm the CTO for John Crane. So that map you can find on the Le Monde newspaper website. And Le Monde, if you search PFAS and Le Monde in Google, you will find it. And Le Monde are campaigning across Europe to show where PFAS are found in the environment. And the data is public assessments for PFAS from ground soil and groundwater.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else on the panel want to make a comment on that particular question?
Given it's water related, I'll introduce myself and make some comment. Martin, my name is Rob Grant. I'm Chief Mechanical Engineer with Atkins Realis, and also here as Chair of the IMechE's Water and Wastewater Technical Advisory Committee. I don't know the answer to Sean's question, but thank you for raising it, Sean. I suspect that given that water supplies and raw water sources are being monitored for PFAS, that's the logical answer. So I concur with Ralph, although I don't categorically know.
Okay. Okay, well, next one that comes up here, when are chemicals added to the REACH list? What is the criteria for adding something to the REACH list, and when are you obliged to do so? Volunteer required.
I think.
Go on,
Yeah,
Ross.
go ahead, Mike.
So I think it's an interesting question. There's two things happening with PFAS in Europe. So there's a class regulation, which is what's being proposed in Europe, which is to regulate all PFAS. And then there's certain materials that are known to be toxic that have been added to the REACH regulation, such as PFOA and PFOS, which are processing aids. And if I can add a bit of context to this, the reason I think we've got the proposal from the European regulators, which covers every PFAS together, is they previously banned one processing aid, PFOA. That was banned. And then industry then created another PFAS processing aid by adding one or two more carbon atoms, which wasn't regulated, which then was also found to be equally as toxic. So the regulators, in their best wisdom, have decided that rather than trying to regulate each one through a REACH process, they're going to try and do a class action against all PFAS, which includes polymers. So I know that's not quite the answer to the question, but there's two things going on, which is you can REACH regulate individual chemicals, but the regulators have decided in their best wisdom that that isn't being effective in Europe. So now they're trying to regulate everything PFAS as a class.
Okay, thank you. Christian, do you have anything to add to that?
I guess, like already said, it's really this kind of coming around the legislation, which really now led to that class action. But it's a little bit too much from my point of view if we already put it to everything.
Okay. Okay, so the next question I've got here, basically there are significant developments in depolymerization over recent months. Are PFAS candidates for depolymerization? So chemists amongst us, I think Ralph and Christian probably might be the best to answer that.
That's a good question, but I'm also not a chemist, I'm a mechanical engineer, so yeah. So I don't know if Mike can help us there, so but I don't know.
There were exactly this kind of academic research for depolymerization, but on an industrial scale, we would consider incineration, so the waste treatment to complete mineralization, meaning that the carbon fluoride breaks down, is washed in the normal incineration, the wastewater treatment plants, and the waste treatment plants was incinerated to minerals like fluorine minerals at the end. So that's then not an issue. So it can be disposed safely and depolymerizate because it's completely burned down to minerals, ashes.
Okay. Okay. All right, anyone else want to comment? I'll move on to the next question. This one's quite a general one. What are the main sources of PFAS getting into water supplies? And are sealing plastics likely to be a source?
I can give a view on that if that's helpful. But this is the crux of the problem, I think, which is only certain PFAS materials are water soluble. Not all of them, and the ones that are water soluble are called processing aids. They're surfactants, fluorinated surfactants, and they're the ones that are known to be harmful to human health, because they can dissolve in water, get inside the body, and then they stick inside the body onto tissue, and they don't go away. So those materials are the bad guys, and that includes PFOA and PFOS, which are the ones that you'll find in all the headlines. So if there's any news that says PFAS are bad, I guarantee it's all about processing aids. But they are linked to polymers, because PFAS polymers, the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority are made in chemical plants that use PFAS processing aids to manufacture the polymers. So they're linked, and then what's happened is the PFAS processing aids, they're not in the polymer at the end of the manufacturing process, but historically they've been discharged to water around the environment where the polymers have been manufactured. And that's led to all of the problems. And it's linked, unfortunately, for any polymer user, in the minds of the regulators, processing aids and polymers. They're two distinct chemicals. They're both PFAS, but the PFAS processing aids are used in the manufacture of polymers at the moment.
Can I just ask something from my field, the brewing industry? We use surfactants in cleaning chemicals for lifting soil when we're cleaning a vessel or pipework, for example. At the end, you're relying on rinsing water to remove it from the vessel before any food comes into contact with it. What happens then? It goes into the sewer, goes into the wastewater treatment plants or whatever. Then can it be treated or removed, or is that it? That's how it's getting in?
So the surfactant, so just to avoid confusion, there's lots of different types of surfactants. There's the ones you'd wash your hands with at home from soap. They're not fluorinated, so they're perfectly safe. But the ones that the surfactants, the processing aids that are fluorinated, behave in a similar way. So they dissolve in water. And in the production of the polymer, the way the manufacturers of polymers have previously done this is they've made the polymer and they've rinsed the polymer that's been manufactured to wash off the fluorinated surfactant. And that's gone into the wastewater around the factories, into rivers, streams and soil. That is almost impossible to get rid of. That's why there's huge legal bills from water companies and governments for the polymer manufacturers, because they're stating that it's a significant challenge to clear and mop up that fluorinated surfactant processing aid that's now in the water. It's not impossible, it's just a huge task.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, yeah, the water industry is sort of waking up to the problem, and I think you're right, Mike, not fully understanding what the problem is, nor indeed how to deal with it, but warning of a big bill coming, which is understandable, I guess. There are processes, fledgling processes out there that are known to capture and ultimately destroy PFAS. Incineration, pyrolysis being two of them. You can capture it through GAC filter, which is not uncommon in the water industry as well. But yeah, it's not fully understood as a problem by the water industry yet.
Okay. All right. Anyone else want to come in on that one? No volunteers. I've just got a question about Christian's paper. We talked about Horolith as being a pretty aggressive chemical in cleaning. Horolith, my experience of Horolith is where someone put too much into a cleaning chemical in a filling machine. The seals are fine, but the stainless steel ended up being very pitted. So it attacks the stainless steel before it attacks the seals. So this is just a word of warning there.
Yeah, sometimes this can also happen. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, that's it comes and goes with proper cleaning procedures. Also, are prolonging seals life for sure. If you leave the cleaning agents in the lines, then you degrade them as well. But this is so true for all materials. I mean, if you make it right, then you have much longer of your equipment, whatever it is, seals, vessels, cars.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Got a question here from Alan Barton, who's not with us here, but basically, what is the medical science around PFAS in humans? I know that Ralph did a slide on this, and who's doing this research, for example?
Yeah, again, the thing is, there's different studies in different countries again, so especially also US, and probably there will be more coming up, because again, also the US is probably very prone to litigation too, and as Mike mentioned, it will be probably affecting and has affected already in the US. I think some of the big manufacturers like 3M, for example, and they're thinking also about getting out of some of the business. So, and again, it's still a big field too. So yeah. So, and the question is again, like you see also with cancer research, is it linked to a certain group of chemicals like PFAS or not? I also basically came across a study not so recently, but I have to check it out again, because it looks specifically into PFOA and PFOS after it was actually started to be regulated in the EU. And over the last 10-15 years, there was actually a reduction found based mainly in drinking water of PFOA and PFOS in general. And that was also basically put down then as positive, that the regulation worked there. So yeah, and like I said, a lot of manufacturers already making fluoropolymers went out 10-15 years ago and voluntarily basically changed the different surfactants.
Okay. Right, thanks for that. I'm just going through a few last minute questions that have come in. There's a statement here from Richard Hellebrand, who's one of our safety guys in the IMechE, basically saying, this is just a statement. My employer manufactures, amongst other things, chlorine and hydrogen in membrane electrolyzers. There is currently no safe alternative to fluoropolymers seals in electrolyzers, piping, instruments, etc. We also make plastics using polymerization with the same safety issues. All these products are essential. So that industry is saying that we can't get rid of PFASs or particular PFASs. Is that going to be something that comes up, or have they got to go and find alternatives?
Well,
Can I comment on that one, Mark?
Of course.
Sorry. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, just I noticed that question. But it's not a question. It's like a plea, a desperate plea, I think, for help.
That's right, yeah.
But there was something sort of from the other side, from unknown user, who said, "You've touched on the negative impacts. What are the positive impacts?" I sort of warmed to that
Yeah.
state, because as scientists and engineers, doing the same thing over and over again in the same ways is not stimulating. But identifying problems and finding clever solutions is what we all, I suspect, get out of bed for in the morning. So without knowing the answer, I'm going to embrace the challenge somehow, and I hope we'll all do the same.
Yeah.
On the essential use perspective, if you look at the, I think the 5,600 responses that EHEDG got to the original proposal, overwhelmingly, everybody from an industrial perspective and an end user perspective was asking for polymers to be exempted from the whole regulation because they're considered critical for industrial applications and there's no viable alternative technology. And in the submission that the European Sealing Association gave to EHEDG, the analysis from the sealing manufacturers and producers was that in 80% of all of the applications for the seals, there was no non-fluorinated available technology to replace it. So only 20% of applications was there any confidence there was an available technology that could replace it right now. So that's the feedback that the European Chemicals Agency have been given, and that's why they've then delayed the next stage of the regulatory process, because they've got such a strong kickback that they're now having to reconsider what they do.
Yeah. I mean, you don't see something like they did with asbestos and CFCs, as such and such a day, you cannot use this anymore.
Yeah,
Is that not going to happen?
I think it's different here because the regulation that's being proposed in Europe isn't because PFAS are dangerous. It's because PFAS are persistent pollutants. Okay. So the definition they've used, which includes polymers, is these materials will exist in the environment for hundreds or thousands of years.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the confusion is, because some PFAS are persistent and toxic, which are processing aid. All of them are persistent, including polymers. But polymers, and this is even more confusing and it's slightly silly, the OECD definition, which is how most people are defining PFAS, is what the EU have used for the class that they want to ban. But the OECD definition of PFAS polymers, main chain polymers like PTFE, FFKM and FKM, is they are substances of low concern. There's no evidence that those materials are toxic or dangerous in any format. They're water insoluble, they're big, they can't be transported around the environment, and there's no published data to show they're dangerous. So the regulation is purely because PFAS are persistent, nothing to do with toxicity. So that's the key difference to asbestos, which is known to cause illness. Whereas the polymers, there's no evidence of danger. However, they're persistent.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anyone else want to make a comment there? Okay. Okay, so it's just coming down towards the last few questions now. I thought in the UK, fluoropolymers were taken out for restriction in contradiction to the EU. What exactly is the situation? I mean, we obviously I don't understand what the actual question too well, but basically what we're saying, the EU have regulations. I guess if we have to supply to the EU, we have to comply with those regulations. Well, necessarily including our law. Is that what we're saying here?
My interpretation of the question is the EU proposal bans everything, is proposing to ban everything that's PFAS.
Yeah.
The UK has come up with its own proposal, but it's only a proposal. And in the UK's proposal, polymers are exempted. So industry would say the UK proposal is far more sympathetic to reality, which is polymers are essential and they're not dangerous. So why would you ban them? Okay. The EU are planning on banning everything. But obviously, if you're a polymer manufacturer in the UK and you want to sell into the EU, you couldn't do it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We've got. If you want to look on your chat box, there's a link to the YouTube recording of this presentation. For any who came in late and anyone who wanted copies of the slides, etc., if they go on that, they will see the recording. So I suggest you just write down the link on there. Sort of these final few questions here. Can the PFAS production process be made zero discharge so no further diluted processing aids are being discharged into sewers environment? My answer, yes, I'm sure they can be, but will they be? So that's down to maybe Rob can answer that one, or Mike.
I can answer that one.
Yeah, it's possible. So I'd say the polymer manufacturers are either doing what 3M are doing, and they've announced they're going to quit the market entirely, or they're working out how they can make the production process safe, and they're using that to then make a case for polymers to be exempted so they can continue to manufacture.
Okay. I'm just going to go through Murat, who's basically our main organizer of this. He's asked this question, so I better cover this one. What kind of PFAS restrictions are being proposed? Total banning, government taxation, regulatory body certification, or any other restriction methods being considered? And at what timescale could they be introduced? How would these restrictions impact on supply chains and impact technology innovation in various process places? Well, we've got 2 or 3 minutes, and then we better call it a day. Can anyone answer that? It's a big question.
All of them.
All of them. Okay. Yeah, that's a nice, simple answer. Yes, I think you're right. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to stop there and apologize for any questions I haven't answered. But maybe we can cover them later. If we'll go through the questions and see if there's any worth answering, we can get the email address and let them know, or add it onto the recording later. Okay, well, thanks very much for everyone for being involved there, and thanks very much for the audience, which peaked up somewhere near 150, which is very good. Thank you, everyone, and maybe we'll do this again sometime. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready to leave. Thank you.